It's December 2025 and we've come to London and the Royal Opera House. And tonight we're gonna watch a performance of The Nutcracker, a real Christmas classic. And perhaps this year things are not going to be quite as usual. And the reason I say that is that the house has just gone through a major lighting rig upgrade project. So we've been coming here since June, following the revival of The Nutcracker on the new rig, and tonight I get to enjoy the show. See you later. The Royal Opera House in London is a world-renowned venue that dates all the way back to 1732. It is sometimes referred to simply as Covent Garden because of how the site was used before the first theatre, Theatre Royal, appeared here. The first ballet was performed on the site in 1734, followed soon after by a season of operas by Handel, many of which had their premieres at the theatre. The Royal Opera House has been rebuilt twice following devastating fire. The third and current building, which still stands today, opened in 1858. Over the years, it has been put to various uses. It served as a furniture repository during the First World War and as a dance hall during the Second World War. Although the building has undergone several improvements over the past 80 years, the main auditorium has remained unchanged since its reopening in 1946. With just over 2,200 seats, it's the third largest auditorium in London. Thanks to its age and architectural beauty, it's Grade 1 listed, which means that strict regulations govern any alterations made to it.
The Royal Opera are based here and the Royal Ballet are based here as well. We have a very large repertoire and most of our work is revivals. So we tend to do about 5 to 6 brand new show productions a year and the rest and about 20, 25 revival productions a year. This is just constantly bringing them back to exactly what they were before. For the audience. Very, very rarely do we do one-offs. Most productions are built to rep. In fact, when we start the design process, particularly working with co-producers, because we often put on productions that are shared with other European opera houses, and they would all be designed to keep coming back and revive, and also to travel between different theatres as well. So we have adaptations for our co-producers. Very, very rarely we'll do concerts or one-off performances. We're very famously short on time. I think every single lighting designer will tell you that lighting at the Opera House is incredibly difficult and under a lot of time pressure, which is actually where you guys come in and really help us out. We would tend to have a technical, maybe 1 or 2 technical days on a new production, and then we would be expected to light over rehearsal from there. We'll do maybe 3 or 4 stage and pianos, 3 or 4 stage and orchestras, the dress rehearsal, and then the show's live. There is pretty much no extra lighting time on top of that. So of course, all of our virtual work that we do beforehand is an absolute blessing because it saves all our time.
So Royal Opera House lighting rig has been in place since the late 90s, and it's a testament to all the lighting teams who've worked here between that time and now, who've kept it running on all of our productions. But it's time to upgrade now. The technology has changed, designers want different things, and it's becoming increasingly more difficult for us to support the products that we had on stage.
With such a tight schedule and massive throughput of shows, how do you find the time to put on a big update project like this? Well, I guess the answer is you don't really, until you can't put it off anymore.
So the upgrade project's really interesting. We haven't had a big development since about 1999. So we're changing the entire rig over to LED and primarily moving towards moving lights. It's really exciting for us because the last time this happened, we were still with tungsten. So now moving to LED, absolutely everything changes. And it's meant the biggest complication is we just have to relight our entire repertory, We just performed a few of our first tentative new shows with the new lighting rig, which we actually we underhung underneath the original battens just to have a test, and the possibilities were brilliant because we've got to an extent where if you want a light, there's a light there. Oh no, I need another light. Well, we've got another moving light here. So I'm pretty sure we're going to run out of moving lights at some point. But at the moment, compared to our old rig, which had parkans and source fours and scrollers, the future's looking pretty good.
Could you tell that in pre-vis already, or was...
Absolutely. You know, we're already building house presets in there. We've put in new big 3/4 backlight, and we're starting to put these in, and we're also starting to make house coverages in Viz so that we can, when a designer sits in the chair, because of the scale of what we've given them to play with, we can say to them, okay, well, we recommend this system from Viz. Here it is. This is our backlight wash with one of our fixture types. Here's a backlight wash with another one of our fixture types. And we've pre-made that in Viz and got it accurate and got it ready for them to use. And the biggest thing as well is they can really work on angles and working with the scenery. Can I get that shot? Do I need to transfer to another fixture? What can I do with that?
We've got a massive rig. We're doing shows day after day after day, and the kit takes an absolute beating. You know, we operate on a 16-hour-a-day basis pretty much every day of the week, apart from a Sunday, which is a 13-hour-a-day. So we are open all of the time. A lot of the kit that we use is, 20, 25 years old. The rig was put in 1999. Some of it's obviously been added, so some of it's not quite that old, but it's just old. It's aging. It's difficult to get parts nowadays for some of this kit. It's just tricky to maintain, I think, is the big problem. But then also you've got external designers that come in and sort of expecting more. And we spend a lot of our time these days currently rigging extra kit, rigging new stuff on top of all of our rig. We've got, I couldn't even tell you how many lights are on the battens currently off the top of my head.
Obviously, there's a lot of equipment that needs replacing, and the age of the venue does show in places. A good example of that is up at the dome, where the follow spots are located. Ah, here it gets more spacious again, all right?
I hope so.
So what's the throw distance?
So from here it's around 25 to 30 meters, I believe.
Is that the longest you...
Yeah, so this is the furthest point away from the stage that we use. So most of our units are source fours, or we use follow spots up here for that reason.
Yeah.
So those Vipers, for example, we tend to use at like 10 degrees.
Right.
And it still almost fills the stage. Which, yeah.
First of all, it's amazing to work in a building that has so much heritage. The complications come from the fact that if we need to change something, particularly in the front of house area, we have to seek permission from English Heritage, which can be anything from like changing a light to a moving light. We need to permission if we make that change. This is since 1999. This is the first sort of wholesale change. Generics are moving to movers. The source is all changing to LED. Color, the scrollers have gone, gel is gone. We're recreating everything.
So we've got 137 fly bars, 7 of which are lighting battens, which come across like 3 of the bars. We rip out the current battens and we place the new battens exactly where the current ones are. We are going to change a lot of conventional units to movers, so that should help us anyway with the current positions.
So we're replacing we're replacing a hell of a lot of source fours. We're replacing a lot of Robert Juliet profiles, 2Ks, etc. We're replacing all of our standard kit, the 5Ks, the 2Ks, VLs, discharge. We're replacing everything essentially that's in our standard rig, and eventually we'll be replacing all of the equipment we use with hopefully LED better, equivalents, which will be way better power savings, etc. All of those kind of things that just make the world a bit better. So we're replacing, I would say, probably about 10 to 15 different types of fixtures, really. Some of those fixtures are quite hard to replace. We're looking for replacements for swabbaters and 10Ks. We have a moving 18K HMI Fresnel. At the minute, that's how we're going to replace that. Do you know what I mean? Like we've had a good go at it with a couple of moving lights, but there's not a single source light that will do the sort of things that will do. So, like for example, Lab OM uses that heavily as a big 3/4 backlight. So that there are a lot of challenges we still have yet to solve. The standard rig's not that difficult, to be fair. Like it's been a process in choosing the fixtures.
This is basically what you're planning to replace, right?
Yeah, so we've got all sorts of different fixtures here. We've got some 5Ks and 2Ks. They're essentially attached to Lick Technic arms. So essentially what they are is butchered generic tungsten units, which are attached to motorized everything else. So all of these fixtures actually comprise of a light source, a tungsten fixture, with a moving arm, so we can pan and tilt it. And then upstairs, when they're rigged, they have scrollers on the front as well. So we have three parts of the fixture: the dimmer, the moving arm, and
barn doors.
So these have got snoops on upstairs, so little top hats, and these have got barn doors, but obviously they're not motorized; they're just static, fixed,
limiting the spill.
Absolutely, essentially these should all be spill rings. Really, that's kind of what they're trying to achieve.
Right.
Yeah, so you've got you can see the obvious problems with them. They're tungsten, they're big, they're heavy, they take a lot of power, and obviously they're quite old, so they are pretty consistent when they're calibrated correctly, but there's a whole load of calibration you have to do to ensure that this is pointing in the same direction as the one next to it.
And these are all used for different purposes, I guess.
Yeah, so the 5K sort of comprises a nice backlight, big, heavy, bright backlight. 2Ks are sort of more specials and sort of top light. And these are obviously our pipe ends, sort of specials, work light, occasionally the wings, because they can see the furthest off, that kind of thing.
And here's the new kit.
This is the new kit, yeah, exactly. So hopefully this summer we're going to be replacing all of that with this sort of stuff. So they're not all one-to-one specifically. We've got sort of a clever revival procedure that sort of figures a lot of it out for us. But that allows a little bit of sort of flexibility depending on what show you're doing and what's used.
But they are obviously still quite different from the other lights in terms of, how do you match? You mentioned you use scrollers, so are you matching colors?
Yeah, so I spent about a month in a room with a source floor and each of these fixtures, and essentially we took a color from each of the scrolls, basically every slide we had, and basically put it in a source floor, used that as our sort of median point, matched the color in these, and then we've got all the colors. Obviously that doesn't apply to HMIs, those kind of things. That's a completely different problem that we're going to deal with at some point. But we're also going to try and take the colour that we have done. We're going to try and do some extra, sort of go an extra step further, because obviously these fixtures are a lot brighter than an auto, a Viper XIP compared to an auto yoke is a big difference. So what we're going to also do is we've taken, if we put the source 4 at full, 575 or 750, whatever lamp I think there's a 575 in it for us, we would then match lumen output in the Viper, so drop it down to 50%, whatever, and make it so that the lumens are as close as they can be. And then that means that actually we can use some clever syntax in EOS to do basically, if it's in this color, I want you to be at a percentage of what you were at. If you were at 20% in that versus 20% in that is very different. So be at 5%, say, for example. So you can do all that sort of clever math inside the console.
Similar thing for zoom angles? Or...
Yeah, so the intention for that is hopefully we shouldn't need to do too much math. So we're going to try and do a lot of swapping out old fixture profiles that aren't necessarily accurate with newer, better user data inside of it, using preserved native, which will then allow us to, if that's at 70 degrees, obviously these won't do that, but they'll know that they should be at the widest they can be.
Match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But obviously we know that the zoom in a VL1000 isn't linear. So we have to sort of try and match that as best we can. We'll try and do some sort of step system.
A massive rig and lighting upgrade project like this is going to give you a lot of new lighting capabilities. And that means that some of the limitations you might have had when you put on a show originally, well, they might not exist anymore.
Obviously, we have a much greater flexibility now in the fixtures, and a lot of the time in the revivals, we're actually replacing a single focus with a moving light, which we tend to keep because we have to stay true to the original design. So whilst there's sometimes a big temptation to make big wholesale changes, we have to stay true to the original designer's intention and just rebuild what was there before. It's really interesting to see which shows we revive, how they come back, because we have some that were just not documented at all. And we have to rely on maybe an old video, or we have to rely on some photographs from the time. But of course, color is completely different depending on how the camera was set up. So there's a bit of artistic interpretation on what we think the feel of this piece should be and what it was. But great new software for documenting presets, taking photos, video software that has cues imprinted on it. All of these things just make the whole process a lot quicker and a lot smoother for us.
Has there been any kind of surprise in this upgrade project with regard to documentation and management?
I think one of the interesting things was actually using the visualization software. I had a show recently that was really poorly documented for whatever reason, to the point where I had to actually take the lighting rig back to the old rig, visualize it to find out where the lights were, then go forwards and then put it onto the new rig. So I had to use it to make it work.
Visualization plays a key role of the operation of the lighting department at the Royal Opera House, not just for the upgrade project, but also on a daily basis. And at the heart of that is the visualization suite, where Saul is waiting to tell us about the magic and wonders of the visualization suite.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So this is the visualization suite at the Royal Opera House. So we basically use it to visualize all of our shows. It's the workhorse for the lighting control and visualization department. So we are in here constantly, either prepping shows or visualizing shows, essentially doing all things programming and pre-visualization.
Excellent. So what kind of equipment do we have in here?
So we run ETC EOS over here. We're currently running 3.3 so that we can use expanded processing, so that we can control the many fixtures in the rig, as the parameter got way too high for any use of the console. We also run Apple Mac everywhere in here, so we're running Mac Minis everywhere, and then we are running a Mac Studio for our visualization setup. Yeah.
But I see capture on many screens, so there's something more at play here.
Yes, so we're running a switcher, an Extron switcher, which allows us to push any of the screens that look like this onto any other screens. So on a day-to-day, when our ALD is sat here, lighting designer is sat here, programmer, and then we have a hot desk over there for our either our model room assistant or our production electrician. And then we have the seat that Ernesto or I usually sit in over in the corner. Any of the screens that are over there could be switched onto any of the other screens in the room. Right. That means that when a lighting designer sat here and looking at cues or something using her computer via a client console, she can then switch over and ask if something's going to make a shot, and we can push a top plan or a section view from capture straight to their screen. So they don't actually have to understand how the software works. Yeah. We can still maneuver it from where we are, but we can just push it around.
Right. And I've understood that sometimes they're also working remotely?
Yes, so that is also connected to Microsoft Teams. So it's fully Teams integrated, which has allowed us to have sessions with designers in Germany, designers in Manchester. So it just means that they don't have to come to London every single time for a visualization session. Yeah.
So what kind of tasks would the capture assistant be performing?
So the day-to-day for myself and Ernesto is texturing the file, making sure the file is all looking nice, getting it all into capture, and then we set everything up on DMX movers. So we're then able to maneuver all of the set via ETC EOS. We can move all the lighting bars, as we're doing now. Yeah. And essentially we do that so that if we're ever to revive a piece, as we're coming onto this new rig now, any shows that we've drawn on the old rig, it means that we can use filters in the old file, put everything on a correct filter and correct layers, so DMX movers and the relevant pieces of set. Save that file, open up the new file, and then import that model.
I also see you've got 3D mice.
Yeah, so we're using 3D mice to maneuver around the 3D model. I think it helps. Well, it definitely helps Ernesto and myself while modelling and texturing and flying around the venue. It makes it look a lot more realistic.
I see the venue is quite realistic, actually. Does that help sell the...
I found it really helps sell visualization to the designer. That's why we spent so long making it look so realistic. Obviously, it's from the LiDAR scan originally. We found that designers, once they saw that, wanted to do a lot more work in here. It was like the subconscious was saying it must be real because of how realistic it looks.
Yeah. Getting the visualization to such a realistic level does take a bit of work. It's a process that is heavily Blender, Adobe Substance Painter, and Capture based.
So I work a lot with the traditional 3D modeling pipeline. So a lot of the modeling will happen in Blender. All of that then is unwrapped and then is brought into Adobe Substance Painter, where we do the original texturing with the artwork that we get from the designers. And then this is exported into Capture.
Right. So it always starts with the original artwork from the designers. Do you go and take photos at any point, or is it all?
So for a revival show, a lot of it will come from archive photos. If it's a new show, it will be artwork that potentially comes directly from the designers. And for a show like the Nutcracker, a lot of it is actual photos that we have of the cloths, of the props or scenery, and then bringing them into Adobe Substance to adjust colors, but also to add additional information like normal maps that are read by Capture so that the models look a bit more realistic.
Lighting a show in visualization could be challenging enough, but the team here at the Royal Opera House are relighting shows based off of old documentation with new equipment. So you can imagine how much they rely on the accuracy of the visualization.
As we're going through our repertoire, we are slowly building up more and more capture files for every single show. So every time we come to revis a show again, we're going to have the model built. We're going to have the previous capture. And the team here in Lighting Control have done a lot of work on making sure that the accuracy in the real world is the same as the accuracy in the model. So any changes we make on stage, we can transfer back into the vis again. So next time we revisit, because things like the Nutcracker will be done again, we've got an amazing starting point, and we can continue to build on the work every revival.
What sort of show documentation are you working off of? Do you have previous programming or pictures?
So it's very variable. It all depends on how it was at the time, the people involved, the time pressures involved. Or for something very good, we'll have video, we'll have software that provides preset data, we'll have photos of presets and total documentation. And then the process is a little bit easier. It gets very hard when we get a show that has nothing except a video, for example, because then we really have to work very hard to relight the piece without the presets.
I think the most challenging bit is to sort of make sure that we are getting the essence of what the actual show is when it comes to a revival, because in a way we're using all of this technology to keep the classics alive, and it's very important to keep that classic essence. So through the work that I do with the texturing is to make sure that what we get on screen is actually going to look like those materials, and understanding how light reacts to these surfaces in terms of how much light it absorbs, how much it reflects back, its properties. So it's just trying to find that balance and marrying all of these softwares so that in a way, in the end product, once we bring everything into Capture, we are actually getting the same essence, and it looks the way that everyone knows that it looks.
So the upgrade project has meant that we have to viz a lot earlier. We would normally doing this a lot closer to Christmas, as it's the Nutcracker, but we are having to do it now a lot earlier in the year, and we're going to have 2 sessions because there's so much work to do on the channel change, the color work, because the new rig isn't a one-to-one replacement. So we also have to do some merging and some working out some new design parts.
Fast forward to August, and after months of preparation and anticipation, virtually all of the new rig is finally in place. The team now has its hands full with weeding out the last remaining issues and performing several visualization calibrations. So I was gonna say you've just got these in, but they've been in for a few weeks, I guess.
Yeah, so we did 2 shows with them on like a temporary rig basis, and now we're in the full in the full setup.
So all the old kit is gone at this point. The old fly bars are...
So the old baton system was all ripped out during part of last season. And now we're onto the new baton system, all the new lights. All the old scrollers are gone. 2Ks are gone and the 5Ks are gone, so ready to get started.
Does it feel similar in any way, or is it like completely different?
There are a lot of similarities from the old rig to the new rig, which helps us with reviving the old shows. Yeah. But every light is now all singing and all dancing, so it's a lot different to what we had before. Yeah, so we have uphauled our entire lighting rig. So phase 1 was the overheads and front of house. So we've changed all of our overheads, taken out all of the infrastructure for the overheads. So we've got new battens, new fixtures everywhere, new fixtures front of house. And for us down here, that meant redrawing and remaking our base capture model and ensuring that all of our fixtures are calibrated and correct in that model. So we've been visualising shows last year, preparing for this year, and then we're going back this year and revisiting that, knowing now what we know because we've done our first couple of revivals.
So obviously you have a new, very different rig, but does that make the previous process feel different also, or is it just the same?
I think it's very similar. It's just our understanding has obviously come along quite a bit, and our belief in how true to real life it's going to be has come along quite a bit. Essentially saying that it's a lot more accurate now, so we do a lot more in visualization, whereas previously we would have said, yeah, that's roughly the right position and we'll just make presets. Now we have the ability to make cues and look at colors as well inside the software downstairs.
Getting the position and orientation of each light right is critical. Here, Ernesto is using a laser measurement tool in order to check the location of each light on the balconies. As he's progressing, he adjusts the master drawing as necessary, ensuring that it's in sync with reality. This step is necessary for the footprints of lights to end up where they should in visualization. Zoom angles are another crucial aspect of visualization. Unfortunately, the information provided by manufacturers on this is rather limited, so the team relies on Capture's zoom correction tool to bridge the gap. Each type of fixture is set up at a suitable location and some initial measurements are taken. Based on this, the full zoom range can then be analyzed live while correcting the visualization as they go. Once done, it's time to verify the results. Here, Saul is using one of the lights on a balcony to compare its behavior in visualization with that of reality. At this point, it's very useful to have the full auditorium in the visualization, as that provides valuable points of reference for the comparison. The team also uses the sculptures on the balconies to record validation cues. They focus and frame each light on a predetermined sculpture on the opposite side of the auditorium. This is useful when a light has been taken down for maintenance and put back up, or even replaced. The team can then play back these cues while adjusting the light to match the original orientation. Fast forward to December, and the hard work the team has put in calibrating all the fixtures and getting the visualization model right has paid off. A few shows have already been put on stage with the new rig, including the Nutcracker, which is being focused behind me. So let's hear how the team thinks everything has gone.
It's gone well. The revival on Nutcracker has been good. We've definitely made something that's quite beautiful, and we've certainly improved some scenes with the LED, and it's come back really well. And I think the audiences are loving it, and it's been really successful. The amount of time we had on stage was really small on this one. We started it on the Sunday, and we opened the show the following Saturday. So having done all of the pre-work through Capture meant that all of the focuses, all of that pre-work with the focus was already there. So when we hit the go button on the cues, lights were in the right places. And then, of course, what we'd also looked at was we've looked at some effects and some animations in pre-vis as well. And that all came back really well and just helped to sort of build the image, for example, where the tree grows, to really create movement in the light that helped enhance the scenes. The biggest challenge, and particularly on this show, on the Nutcracker, this has been one of the biggest ones, is that it's a show with lots of nostalgia and had a lot of warmth from the tungsten, which has been really hard to replace with LED because it's just not the same type of product. So we've really had to battle with that to make it feel as Christmassy and magical as it did before. But some scenes it's been massively successful. We've really got much more clarity, and in other scenes sometimes perhaps we need to do a little bit more work to just bring that comfort in. But it's been good.
It's quite special when you get to see the show after working the model. Sometimes a bit of surprises, because when it's a new show, for example, we have to assume what it's going to look like, because sometimes we're visualizing before the set is even built, and then when the curtain comes up and you realize, oh, maybe I didn't get that material exactly as it was. But when it's a show like the Nutcracker, and it's something that we actually have all of the references of what it actually looks like, it's quite nice to see that a lot of the work that we're doing in Viz is actually translating as it should on stage.
So our next challenge, I think, is bringing in Fly's automation data to make it as accurate as possible. But also, I think the next step really is a virtual production or a virtual tech. So getting every element of the technical side into visualization. At the moment, we're using DMX movers to simulate a lot of the moves, whereas if we could integrate PSN and our automation systems, then we're virtually doing every element of tech, so that should speed us up in the long run.
Well, the 590-second performance of the Nutcracker was amazing, and so has it been to follow the process of the upgrade project at the Royal Opera House from close. So we'd like to extend a massive thank you to the team here at the Opera House and for their endless patience with us mucking about here. And thank you so much for watching.